I want to share how I turned my t-shirt business dream into reality and how I produced the official Atypical Daydream t-shirt, all thanks to Printful. Imagine this: no storing inventory, no worries about unsold stock, shipping hassles, or handling returns. Printful lets you create high-quality products made and shipped worldwide directly from your desk. And it's completely free to use. You only pay for what you sell. You can print a variety of products: t-shirts, hoodies, bags, shoes, blankets, greeting cards, and much more. So, are you ready to make your dream project or business come true? Check out the show notes for the official link to the Atypical Daydream t-shirt and my affiliate link to get started with Printful. Using the affiliate link supports my podcast, helping me bring you more incredible stories. Thanks for the support.
The police arrive. There's like 6 of them. And I'm like, what is going on? And then a detective arrives and he says, you're going to have to come with me. So now I'm in the police car. I'm taken down to the station and I'm in this whole thing is so ridiculous.
Hello, my Atypical Daydreamers. Welcome to the show. We're back for season 4, and today my guest is Michael Merryman. He's a veteran producer of commercials, music videos, documentaries, stills, art, and experimental productions. In today's journey, Michael travels the globe in search of the tallest, longest, and biggest wonders, all to create a car commercial.
You know, it came a time years ago where my daughter was at an age where I came back after a trip to Argentina and she had just changed so much. She was like 18 months at the time. And it was like, okay, I gotta stop this. And I've been in LA for her whole life, basically. And now she turns 18. You know, I've started kind of a new chapter in my career. It's interesting to now be back out on the road as a nearly 50-year-old man versus, you know, growing up on the road. One particular project I did around about 2005, I got a call to do a job. It was a still campaign for a major automotive brand. I'm not sure if I can say which one it was, and we essentially were charged with going to find the longest, tallest, highest, widest around the world. And we started out in Ecuador shooting the world's highest active volcano. So many stories about this particular trip because it was all compacted into about a 2-month period. And it was a bit weather dependent. So we found ourselves kind of back and forth. I should probably preface it by saying I was a very different person than I am now, bordering on dangerous, if not, you know, just nutty. I was separated from the crew for a couple of days because I was in the hotel where I had like proper communications, and they were up at the base camp. And I had been out there once on the Scout, and you know, this is before the era of easily accessible, you know, digital maps and so forth. And so I kind of memorized my way back through the city, which is this pretty interesting, wild place, and found my way out to this village and up to the pass. And I met a couple of the location guys there. And from the point where you left the little village up to the base camp was just a rutted road. And so they met me with some beers, and they gave me like 2 beers, and I opened one and had a sip. And, you know, at altitude, it goes straight to your head. And so I'm kind of driving up in this rented SUV, or was it a little Suzuki Samurai? It was teeny, but it had 4-wheel drive. And so I'm kind of going up. And as you reach a certain point, which happens to be the tree line, where the tree line ends, you also get the radio signal back from Quito. And so I'm kind of driving along, and I'm feeling a little bit kind of like lightheaded and whatever. And I mean, not terrible. I don't mean to say that I was completely out of my mind, but it's just not something I do now as a grown-ass man. But so at this moment where the radio pops back on, I had it turned up kind of loud and forgotten about it. I'm just kind of sitting there wending my way through. It's getting thinner and thinner air. I think the base camp up there, if I'm not mistaken, was, don't quote me, but I think it was about 12,000 feet, maybe higher, maybe it was like 14. I'd have to look it up. But the radio pops on, and there's Sade, Smooth Operator, just playing. And it was just like this such surreal juxtaposition. It was such a bizarre thing. And then I get up to the base camp, and we sat there, and I was working with a German photography team, and we sat there and enjoyed a couple more beers, but like we're looking up at the volcano, and people, I guess, climb up there so that they can summit at sunrise and then come down safely in the light. And you could see this little teeny trail of like headlamps. And then we went up and shot the ice roads in Inuvik, which was interesting. It marked the shortest shoot day of my entire career because the sun rose at like 11 a.m. and it set again at like 1:30 or 2. But it was like 38 below zero. And I remember it happened to be the same temperature where Fahrenheit and Celsius comes together. And I was working with a German crew. And I remember, we always had, differences in Celsius and Fahrenheit throughout the whole trip. But at one point we were standing out there, and I kind of said during a lull in the conversation, well, I think we can all agree that it's fucking cold. There's no real rental car companies. You just kind of find some people and make a deal with them. And we rented this woman's Subaru, very nice woman, and we accidentally left a case of Coca-Cola in the back of her car that was for the crew. And it exploded in the night. And I was like, oh my gosh, it felt so bad. What are we going to do? How do we get this cleaned? And so we drove to set and we shot the day, which was short. By the time we get back in the car, there's not a trace of anything. It almost smelled like scratch and sniff sticker, like smell, like the way that like Coca-Cola would smell if it was faked or synthetically recreated. And it was like this mist all around the car. And then by the time I got back in the car, it was just gone. It was just nowhere to be found. It was not a trace of it, just disappeared. And so the next day we brought the car back to this woman and I said, listen, I'd be remiss not to tell you that, this happened. And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. And I was like, well, where does it go? And she goes, none of us really understand it. It's some sort of weird anomaly where when this pressurized, whatever you left in the car comes out, she goes, it's better with sugary drinks than it is with beer. But even with beer, it just disappears. You can kind of smell it faintly as if it's like a fake recreation of the smell. And then it just disappears when the temperature changes either lower or higher. And it was just a very interesting kind of memory that I had. And then we moved on to China. We shot in Shanghai. We shot the world's longest on-ramp, the on-ramp from Shanghai onto the Pudong Bridge, which is like this circular corkscrew that goes all the way up to this bridge that probably sits, it's tall. I mean, sort of Golden Gate height, maybe a little less. And we got there, we quickly found out that there really are no permits there. It's more just like sanctioned bribery, if you will. And they were like, well, we're sorry. We know you wanted to shoot on this day, but it's going to have to be the next week. So we completely reworked the schedule. And from there, caravanned out across through a series of flights and then actually like a car ride out to the Taklamakan Desert, where we kind of connected with this portion of the Silk Road that passes through far, far western China. We were about 400 kilometers from the area where Pakistan kind of pushes into the Himalayas into China. And when we got to the Taklamakan, we went out into these dunes in like this old army truck that was like a dune truck, basically. It was like a 8-wheel truck. When they took us in the desert, they said, if you have to pee, do not go any more than a single dune away from the main crew because it's very dangerous. People get lost. And so I kind of went one dune away and was like, just felt a little weird, you know what I mean, to be that close to the crew. So I did go 2 dunes over. And by the time you get there, it's kind of overcast. So you have no sun reference. The wind blows to a degree that you look back and there's no sign of your own footprints. And so, I did my thing and turned back around. I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm exactly 2 dunes away in this direction. I was sure of it because I turned around, I did a full 180 turn and just walked back over the first one. By the time I get to the second depression in the dune, it was like terrifying because I literally was only going on memory. And I was like, okay, I'm like 99.9% sure that I have to go just one more. But if I'm off, I was just like kicking myself. I was like, why did I not listen more carefully to these guys? Of course they know what they're doing. And I happened to come up to the top of the dune and the crew was just moving on. And one of the guys had stayed with me and he's just sitting there shaking his head. Just like, you went 2 dunes, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I did. I'm sorry. And then I started to get really sick. Like, you feel like your body's like a radiator. You know what I mean? And I was just like, oh man, this is going to be horrible. We're in the middle of nowhere. We're so far from anything. And, constantly moving. And one of the translators said, oh, you don't look well. And I said, yeah, I'm feeling like, super hot. She's like, okay, well, we'll send one of the drivers back into town. And they they came back a little while later with this, it looked like a dime bag, really, you know what I mean? Full of all these different herbs, dried herbs. And the instruction was eat them all at once, no water, and sleep, which I did. I slept for like an hour in the back of this like van that we had. And I woke up feeling absolutely fine. I have no idea what I ate, but I described my symptoms and how long they'd been and ate these bitter tasting herbs and woke up totally fine. It was so strange, such a bizarre thing.
Hey, Josh here. I love making this podcast, and I'd love to make it my full-time gig. Besides telling the stories, I'm basically a one-man band, and that takes time. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the Patreon link in the show notes. And thanks.
By the time we got to China and we came back the second time to Shanghai and were able to get back on that bridge, we were all just really exhausted. It was just like, okay, it's pretty wild. And each and every day that I was there with the owner of the company, who each and every day would come back and he was always like, I want to treat you to a massage at the hotel. We were staying at the Peace Hotel in Shanghai. Beautiful there. They call it the Paris of Asia. There was this really nice spa, but it was closed. It was only open until 9 at night or something. And each night we'd come back and he's like, I really want to treat you to a spa. It's been a really hard thing. And so I was like, that's great. So we finally get back on the very last night. We're about to fly home the next day. We've been on the road for little more than 2 months. And my phone rings. We had been to dinner. And we had this bizarre dinner of snake that came to the table live. They would slice the belly of the snake and pull its skin off and it's writhing. And I was, okay, we'll try this. And then they take the gallbladder of the snake out and they place it into these 4 glasses. And then they pour this, I guess like a kind of a moonshine over it. And you shoot it. And it's traditional to drink this sort of like bathtub gin made of some sort of plum wine, I guess, but it's distilled afterwards and it becomes like a hard alcohol. And evidently this gallbladder shot that you take is supposed to lower your body temperature by like a degree or something. I don't know. There's a lot of sort of mythology involved and you kind of never knew if somebody was pulling your leg or if it was true. But I did at least feel like that afterwards, kind of quite cold, and ate this snake afterwards. It was prepared. It was very delicious. And I go back to my hotel and I'm feeling pretty otherworldly. And the phone rings and it's like, massage. And I was like, great. That sounds perfect. Clearly not thinking, clearly realizing it's 10 at night. This masseuse shows up, but there's a man with her who's standing outside of the doorway, and I'm immediately embarrassed. And I'm like, okay, I'm in a little bit of trouble here. This person makes this gesture, which you can imagine what the gesture is, and has communicated to me that she's here for this other reason, and I'm just embarrassed, and I don't know what to do. And so I just go into my bathroom. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm here for work. How could I have not realized what this was? And I hear her outside speaking in Mandarin. And I'm like, okay, she wants money. And I'm like, what do I do? And when I come out, she had stolen my petty cash. It wasn't a ton, but it was significant. And so I call the owner of the company who's staying with me. And I was like, you're not going to believe what just happened. I feel so embarrassed. What a stupid thing to have done. And he's like, we've spent so much money at this hotel and we've been here for 2 weeks and, this is predatory. And so he calls down to the front desk and he said, we're going to call the police. And the manager said, sir, that's not a good idea. He's a bit of a hot-headed guy. He's like, I demand that you call the police right now. We want to recover this money. This is clearly something that's happened in your hotel and you knew about it. And so the police arrive. There's like 6 of them and they're photographing my room and taking like fingerprints, like putting on a whole show. It was like being in like an NCIS episode. And I'm like, what is going on? Now, by this time, the manager has come up to the room And so is the owner of the company's there. And he's looking at me like, I think I've made a terrible mistake. And I was like, what's happening here? And then a detective arrives. And this detective is in my room smoking a cigarette. And he says, you're going to have to come with me. So now I'm in the police car. I'm taken down to the station. And I'm in this whole thing is so ridiculous. I'm sitting in this room that looks like it was dressed by if I was pranked, it would make sense. There was a window that wasn't a two-way mirror, but it was so dirty and dingy that it may as well have been. And I was like, in my brain, I look back on this and I was like, at that time in my life, I always like to push things for the adventure. And I was like, okay, let's see what happens next. Well, the officer pushes essentially a confession to me on the table. And he speaks to the manager of the hotel who's come with me. They've allowed the manager of the hotel to come with me, but not the owner of the company that I was working for. He's back there freaking out because he thinks that his hot-headedness has got me into trouble. And I'm sitting there kind of thinking, well, let's see what happens next. And I look to the end of the table, and the manager of the hotel looks at me. His eyes are wide, and he just gives me this almost imperceptible shake of his head, like, don't sign this. And basically, the translation was, we know these people, we know what they're up to. All you have to do is sign a confession saying that you partook in these services, and we can get your money back. Otherwise, we can't get the money back. And I'm like, what is this? And so on and on this thing goes. The cop offers me a cigarette. I smoke a cigarette. It's like this whole, it was like a movie. And then I look back at the manager of the hotel. He gives me that kind of shake again. I said, no, I just can't. It's like, fine, the money's gone. It's stolen. We get out. We come back. We pull in front of the hotel. The manager gets out of the back seat. I'm in the front seat with the detective guy, right? And he looks back, says something in Mandarin to the manager, who gets out, kind of gives me this nervous look. Now I'm alone in the car with the cop. He looks over at me in English and says, you made the right decision. Hope you enjoyed China. Have a nice trip home tomorrow. And that was it.
I want to thank Michael for sharing his experience. Be sure to check out the show notes for Michael's recommendations, including the Glue Society, Rogue Captains, and the book The Storm Before the Calm. All amazing stuff. This podcast was created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. If you like the show, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to financially support the show, check out my Patreon page. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next week.